Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to continue forward with the four agreements. We just finished the fourth agreement last week, so today we are moving on to just a couple more chapters left. This week, the Toltec Path to Freedom. This is going to talk about everything related to breaking old agreements. How do we move forward? Like, okay, we have these four agreements, but we still are attached to all the fear-based agreements from the dream of the planet. How do we break free now? That's where we're kind of going to delve into a little bit today. Before we do that, last time, like I said, we talked about the fourth agreement, which is always do your best. And we talked about how you can't beat yourself up about your efforts at a particular task. The way that you refrain from doing that is just you always give your best. And you can't get all worked up about, like, let's say, for example, you score 50 points one night, only 20 points the other night. If you give your best in both of those moments, you shouldn't be beating yourself up because you gave your best on both nights. Right? Your best can change from moment to moment. Some days it's going to be 50 points. Other days it's going to be 20 points. And this is something that was, in my line of work, I kind of do get very critical of myself. If, I do a bunch of coding on one day, I feel great. The other day, not any coding, just kind of like debugging, stepping through code. And I get critical of myself because I look at what I did the previous day. Oh my gosh, look at all these classes that I just wrote, all these interfaces that I just wrote, setting up the repository later in the spring project. Today, I didn't do shit, it seems like. But you know what? It's dictated on the scenario of that particular day. Some days, the debugging is going to be my best. And that's all the situation affords to me. There's no other new code to write. Just don't be critical of yourself. Your best can change from moment to moment. And when you do your best, it doesn't even feel like work. You get inside of like a flow state. I've heard people talk about that. There was a book written on this too, about flow. You do those things, you won't feel the need to punish yourself. That's why it's important to always give your best. When you give your best, if you don't exactly follow those first three agreements, it's okay. You did your best. Come at it tomorrow and be impeccable with your word tomorrow. It's going to be a process. It's going to take a while. So I thought that was a really, really good chapter, a good agreement. I mean, all these agreements are very good ways to live your life. But I really did enjoy this last one. Let's continue forward with the Toltec Path to Freedom. And the author kind of starts out here asking some questions here. Are you really free? And you kind of got to think about this. Are you free? What is freedom? What does it mean to be free? And the author kind of gets at here that freedom is to be who you really are. So are you doing that? Am I doing that? I think the answer sometimes is no. Sometimes I feel like I'm living expectations according to what other people see in me. So who are those other people? Who stops us from being free? And why can't we be ourselves? And I think, as you guys may ascertain from reading and going over these previous to those old agreements, from the dream of the planet and the domestication, the dream of humanity and the domestication of the planet, I think that's a big reason why we can't be ourselves. We're trying to live based on these older agreements. And that's what the author says here is the difference between when you're a child and when you're an adult. When you're an adult, you realize and you're very cognizant and you become the judge. You live by this book of law, and you become a victim to it. And remember, we were talking about that cycle. You judge, you punish, you become the victim. You keep following the book of law, so you keep judging and keep laying out punishments, and it's all just a vicious cycle. But when you're a child, you're young, wild, free. And I think adults, parents, society does, and most of the time are successful in getting you to follow the agreements that they are following. So, but for a fleeting moment, when you're a child, when you're young, you have these fleeting moments where you're not tied down by these previous agreements, and you don't punish yourself. You don't judge yourself. You are who you want to be. And that's kind of a special thing for just a fleeting moment. Can we get back to that? Well, maybe we can. Maybe we can. The author then, as we move on here, the author then talks about these three masteries. The three masteries to controlling your own dream. He states that we are doing things just to please others, not who we truly are. We kind of just touched on that moments ago. But your life is a manifestation of your dream. Most of the time, for most people, I think their lives are a manifestation of the dream of humanity, of what society is dictating here. All right, so you have to become a master of your own dream and how you want to live. So if you change your dream, you're going to change your life. You're going to start to feel a lot differently about yourself. You change your surroundings, you're going to change your life. And I even put this here because I've heard this before. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You change your friends, you're going to change your life. You change the people you spend time with, you're going to change your life. Are you hanging around with people who have these expectations and are living by these old agreements? So now you are kind of feeling obligated to follow these old agreements, or are you spending time around people who are very positive? They want you to be just who you want to be, not who they are. So these are some things that you can change, and then in the process, you change your life. But the author talks about the Toltecs. If you guys remember, we brought up the Toltecs throughout this book, mainly in that first chapter about the dream of humanity and the domestication of the planet. But the Toltecs were dream masters, and it kind of sounds like they took control of their life and they weren't living their lives by old agreements, by those fear-based agreements. So they were masters as far as awareness, transformation, and intent. Awareness, transformation, and intent. And I'm trying to find the part. Here we go. I'm trying to find the part in the book. The three masteries that lead people to become Toltecs. Mastery of awareness. So awareness is who you really are and what possibilities you have at your fingertips. Transformation is how to change and how to be free from the domestication and transform from living out the old dream into living out your dream. And then intent is life itself, that unconditional love. And I believe also intent here could mean action and actually taking action and doing something to transform your life. It's the thing that it's the rotors, it's the motor that pushes you forward in your life to break these old agreements. And the author, we've talked about this before, about like a computer virus. The judge, the victim, the belief system has a control on your mind just like a parasite does. And we have the example in the past, I think, about a computer virus, and I think that's appropriate here as well. Computer virus, parasite. It just feeds off the host. and it's with you for life, these old agreements or this old way of living. So you kind of have two choices in this. You can keep living the way you are, keep having this parasite feed off of your body, or you can declare war on this parasite. And this is where the author brings up warriors. This is who warriors are. So warriors, yes, maybe you can think of a warrior as going out into battle against an enemy, but that enemy doesn't have to be external. That enemy can be within you. Those warriors are going to fight against that parasite that lives inside of them. And they're trying to change that dream, that dream of humanity into a heaven for themselves. So how do you fight this parasite? Well, you can do a couple things. The first one is just facing our fears one by one. And the author kind of talks about that this is a very slow, methodical approach, but it's doable. So when let's say you go through all the things that kind of make you upset, or you really start to think about one by one, like what are these the previous agreements? Why are they making me feel upset, emotional, fearful? And you really consciously take a look at where are all these feelings rooted in, and then try to replace that with something more positive. It's doable, but it's a slow process, as the author says. But every time you face one of the fears and you realize what the origin of it is, and you move on from it, you gain a little bit more energy. You get a little more free. The second approach here is to stop feeding the parasite altogether. So if you don't give the parasite any food, the parasite dies by starvation. So what does he really mean by that? He means don't fuel that parasite with emotions that come from that fear. And it's easy to say, but it's very difficult to do. So just don't feed into it. Don't get emotional. Don't become fearful. Just don't feed into it, and slowly that parasite will die. The last way is called the initiation of the dead. And the initiation of the dead, as the author states here, is found in many traditions and esoteric schools. When we die, symbolically the parasite has to die too, because it's living off us, right? So you die as in the old dream dies, and you start to live out a new dream. So when the old dream dies, the parasite has to die too. So let's continue forward. The dream of the second attention. This is how we are going to transform here into the way that we want to live. So the first attention is how your attention was used for the first time to create the first dream in your life. This is the dream of society and all those older agreements that you're following currently. So you're going to be using a second attention, the attention for the second time, and you're going to focus on all those current agreements, and you're going to change them. You're going to swap them out for the 4 agreements that we just went over in this book. So you first have to become aware that you're dreaming all the time, and there's this fog in your mind that's clouding the way you see the world. And this fog is, pretty much those fear-based agreements that you're living out, that you've learned over the course of your life. All of those self-limiting fear-based beliefs that are making you unhappy, you have to become aware of what they are. And then you make an inventory of all that you believe, and then you start the art of transformation. You go out into that desert of the unknown, into those dark depths, and you meet your demons. You meet your demons, which are kind of like those agreements, and you break those agreements and you replace them with these new ones, and you just go step by step. And you got to be patient, and it's a slow process. But over time, and just trying to do it, remember we talked about how quitting smoking, if you just keep trying to do it, eventually it just works. One day, we went over this, I think, 2 episodes ago, 1 or 2 episodes ago, something like that. But it's hard because we're addicted to the way we are. We're addicted to these fear-based agreements. We're addicted to being critical and gossip. You know, we are very addicted to those things, and I'm no different, really. Controlling your own behavior. Oh, we talked about this before about the amount of energy it takes to break an agreement. But every time, yeah, we spoke about this, I think, in the second agreement, where, second or first one, I forget, the energy from breaking an agreement, it takes a ton of energy to break an agreement, but when you break it, it gives you so much more energy back. But it's just initially, it's so very, very hard. And throughout the day, you only have so much energy, mental, physical, emotional, to spend. I've heard people talk about this too, about like your fuel tank, and you have to the day and how much fuel you throw at certain activities, because if you throw all your fuel out in like the first few hours of the day, well, you're not going to have much to do, much of anything later in the day. And maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want to throw all your energy out at a certain task or at work earlier on in the day. Maybe that's what you personally need, and this is going to be up to you, up to each individual person, but just be cognizant of where you're throwing your energy is basically what I'm trying to say. And you got to remember, the way you see the world is going to depend on your emotions, and those emotions are going to have different effects on your fuel, on your energy levels. And I'd like this alliteration here, this kind of illustration of what the author talks about here with infected wounds. And everyone has an emotional body covered in infected wounds, infected with an emotional poison. Emotional poison, sometimes that wound is opened. We respond with emotional poison whenever somebody says something, right? Somebody says something, we take it personally. That's that open wound, and then we respond with something very emotional. But you need truth to heal these wounds. Let me go to page 114. The way you heal the wounds is you have to forgive those who have wronged you. And this can be kind of hard. But in a way, you're kind of following some of these agreements. I forgive you for doing this. I don't take it personally because I know who I am. And you just move forward. That way, you're not thinking about how this person wronged you in the past. You've just moved on. You haven't taken it personally. You know who you are. You've learned from it. We're going to be better moving forward. And it can be very, very hard to do this. I've had experience at this too. Very, very hard to forgive people. You will know when it has worked when you no longer have an emotional reaction to someone when you see them. So that person that you forgive, next time you see them, see how you feel. Because I have definitely experienced this with people who have potentially wronged me. Every time I hear their name or like see them in person, I'm like, I just can't stop thinking about that thing that they did to me years ago. And that kind of just takes hold in my mind. I can't let it go. I start to get emotional. But when you forgive somebody, that shouldn't be there anymore. You forgive them. Let's move forward. And when you have all of this emotion, when that fear is so great, you can't really think straight. The reasoning mind begins to fail. That's where we need to become better, more controlling. I think we're going to talk about this in the next slide. Is control is good. Control over yourself and your emotions, good. That's a good thing. But when you try to control other people, okay, we've talked about this in one of the previous chapters. If you're trying to control somebody and mold them into what you want them to be, you have to just kind of move on into like another relationship. And I'm talking about from a relationship aspect. It's going to be so hard to change somebody. Find somebody who already lives by those values that you hold dear to your heart. Don't try to change somebody. Let's go on to the next slide here. So these warriors that go to battle against these parasites, against these old agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz talks about they have two things. They're very aware that there's a war going on within themselves, and that they have to have discipline to just be themselves, and they know who they are. So they have to be aware and they have to have control, but control over their own emotions, to not have that fog their mind and not take over their reasoning mechanism in their mind. So the victims repress emotions. The warriors refrain from emotions. So what does he mean by that? Repression is they don't show their emotions. They're afraid to say what they want to say. To refrain is to hold the emotions in check and to express them in the right moment, not before or no later. So refraining is more you have control over it. Repression seems like you don't have as much control over it, and you just don't even want it to get out. It's a fear. You fear releasing those emotions because you're afraid you can't really control them. I think it's kind of the difference there. But the best teacher here is this angel of death, which the author talks about. The angel of death is kind of how another way to break these agreements, because the angel of death eventually comes for everybody. And you take death as the ultimate teacher. You just have the present to be alive. So why are you still living by these old agreements? Right, and the author does a thought experiment here. What if the doctor told you that you had 1 week to live? Would you still care about what others thought about you? Or would you finally give yourself the permission to just be yourself for that 1 week? Well, why do you need a doctor to tell you you have 1 week to live in order to live your life this way? Why can't you just do this from now for the rest of your life? Right? That when you surrender to the angel of death, that's when that old dream kind of dies. And you realize your time is short on this earth, and it's time to just be who you are. And you don't carry around the past with you. You don't carry around those past agreements. You let the angel of death take that, because those past agreements are weighing you down. That parasite wants you to carry the past, but just let the angel of death take it. And he had a good part in this book here. Let me see if I can find it for you guys. If we surrender to the angel of death, we will be happy forever and ever. You see everything that's... here we go. So he kind of mimics like a conversation with the angel of death here. The angel of death comes to us and says, you see everything that exists here is mine. It is not yours. Your house, your spouse, your children, car, career, money. Everything is mine, and I can take it away when I want to, but for now you can use it. Think about how much power that has, knowing that at any moment this stuff can be taken away. But for right now, you can use it. Let the angel of death take away all those past mistakes, those past agreements, and just live in the present. Don't take all that baggage with you. I remember from this movie Up in the Air, I think he talks about like a backpack that you carry with you and all of the stuff, not just like physical things, but like emotional things like family issues, relationships, stuff that's just in that backpack. And then after a while, those straps get so heavy that it's hard to move. Right? It's kind of similar to the energy thing we were just talking about. You only have so much energy to think about stuff throughout the day. Where do you want to put that energy towards? Right? I just had somebody ask me if I wanted to go out and train today. And I would have loved to have done it, but I know that, hey, I'm kind of on a time crunch today. If I go train, I'm going to be a little tired. And I'm still going to do a little something today, but I want to do it on my time. Right? So I'm glad that I was kind of cognizant of that. Like, if I go train, I have to drive over there. I'm going to be there for a couple of hours. I don't really have a couple hours. I only have so much energy. Let's not do this today. Why don't we stick around here? We'll do something at my place. It'll be less time. That way, then I can still get out this episode. So I'm glad. I think a younger me would not have gone through that thought experiment there. I would have just loved to have just gone, see my friends, train with them, yada yada. So I've kind of grown in that regard. I'm happy that I made the decision not to go. Anyway, guys, that was a small tangent. I believe this was my last slide. Yes, it was. There we go. Thank you guys so much for listening. We just have one more chapter left. Heaven on Earth, chapter 7. This is kind of a very, very short chapter, so we'll do this. We'll maybe give a brief summary in the next video, a short overview of everything. Not everything, but some of the main points from this book. Thank you guys very much for listening this far, if you made it this far. Big things coming. I got to start to think about the next book that I'm going to read after this. But one more chapter. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. One more video coming out on the 4 agreements. If you guys have any questions, please leave them below in the comment section of this video. Please like and subscribe. We have more books coming. More books coming after this one. Don't you guys worry. And thank you very much. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.